Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. In this one we're going to be discussing one of the most iconic characters in Sonic the Hedgehog, Amy Rose, or rather the truth of said character, her perception if you will. Amy is a character who's been around for a long time, but the way in which she's been relevant to the series has morphed quite dramatically during her lifespan, and this has been muddled a little bit in the current day and has caused a couple misconceptions. With the Sonic Movie 3 on the horizon, fans have naturally been speculating on who they should interpret to be in the next film, and one of those characters has been Amy Rose, with people stating that she is a classic character with a lot of importance in the franchise, so they must make room for her one way or another. And that is what I believe to be a misconception, amongst other things, of Amy's character. I have talked about this a couple times in some of my videos here and there, but I just wanted to make one where I sort of consolidate and focus on that issue as the main focus of this video. So, what is so wrong with saying that Amy is a core character who's been there since the classics, super relevant and needs to be in things that are upcoming with the franchise? It is true that Amy is a classic character. She was made in the classic era, debuting in Sonic CD. However, that does not immediately mean that she was important during that time frame. Amy has, at a guess, maybe less than 2 whole minutes of appearance in Sonic CD, because she's in the intro, the ending, and in 3 stages for a very small amount of time if you don't stop to just stand there. And that's it. She doesn't talk, not that anyone really talks, but she doesn't do anything actively on her own either, and she most certainly doesn't fight. In fact, Amy, for the most part in the classic era, cannot fight. She's a civilian, she's just a normal person who's caught up in Dr. Robotnik's schemes that Sonic needs to save. When you see her again in this classic time frame, she appears as a multiplayer party game sort of character, where it's more, okay, we need some unique looking individuals for people to play as with their friends, and we've already got Amy, so we may as well use her. You've got Sonic Drift 1 and Drift 2, where the characters I think are almost identical, except that they might have a different item drop, or I'm wrong and they were completely identical. It was something like that. And then there was Sonic R, the foot race game, where Amy is present in a car and is the joke character. There were more than one joke characters in Sonic R for sure, but she was one of them because she had to use a car whilst everyone else was using jet rockets or their natural speed. Sonic the Fighters also uses Amy, and because it's a fighting game, they needed a way to have this character who's never been shown capable of fighting before to defend herself. And that is where the first appearance of the Pico Hammer is shown, and it was so that she could fight back. But obviously that was also considered to be a bit of a joke character, because this is the character you wouldn't have expected to be in a fighting game, and then they give her a giant hammer to smash everyone with. Outside of the games themselves during the classic time period, there were also the external media, such as comics and cartoons. And the thing is, Amy was not in any of the cartoons based in the classic era at all, not even hinted at or mentioned. As for the comics, the 2 main ones were obviously Archie and Sonic the Comic. In Archie, Amy does make an appearance, but it's a bit later on, and she's still very much a side character who struggles to make much of an impression due to the fact that the comics already had a large and established cast to begin with. Then, for Sonic the Comic, most people probably don't even know what Sonic the Comic is, because it was a UK-based comic series for Sonic, so naturally it's just less known than Archie's Sonic. and Amy was present in that, and to be fair, she had a decently sized role for that comic run. However, like I said, it wasn't the most known comic run in the world, so you would have to be kidding yourself if you think that appearance alone meant that she was just well known in general everywhere. Even people in the UK may not have read the comic because not everyone knew there was a comic. Amy didn't really come into prevalence until Sonic Adventure 1, where her character was redesigned and reinterpreted for the new story. That's really where everything people consider about Amy stems from, and some of those traits are even being retroactively placed upon her classic self, who lacked a lot of the same characteristics the newer Amy had. And just because she was in Sonic Adventure 1, that doesn't actually mean she was still well known. If you were a fan of Sonic, you would probably know who she was, assuming you've played multiple games before that, or if Adventure was your first game, well, there you go. However, think of it from the general public's viewpoint. Sonic probably was known mostly for the main character himself, his arch nemesis Dr. Robotnik, and depending on if you played or had seen Sonic 2 and Sonic 3, maybe you knew who Tails and Knuckles were. A surprising amount of people, though, didn't even know who Knuckles was by the time the second movie came out recently. So despite how important we perceive Knuckles to be as a classic character, the general public didn't really know who he was anyway. And with Amy, this is even bigger because she wasn't a big deal before Adventure regardless. If you were sort of vaguely aware of what Sonic was, or you occasionally played some of the games perhaps, at Sonic Adventure's marketing time, you probably would have known Sonic himself, Dr. Eggman, maybe Tails or Knuckles, and if anyone new would be added to that list, it would be Chaos, because he was the villain, he was in the trailers, he was the big threat. Amy was just a side character, and not only was she a side character, despite being playable, her story was not unlocked at the beginning of the game, so you would have to play someone else's to get to that point. And for a lot of people, they would just play Sonic's story and call it a day. They wouldn't try out the other ones, it would be a done game for them. And although Amy shows up in Sonic's story, she does so as a side character who needs to be rescued and doesn't do much to help Sonic himself directly. This trend continues if we then look towards Sonic Adventure 2, which is one of the highest rated Sonic games of all time, which is relevant because it means it's one of the most well-known Sonic games of all time. And in Sonic Adventure 2, we have a new character, Shadow the Hedgehog, and he is the person you're going to remember from the marketing or from playing the game above anybody else. You may already know Sonic, Tails and Knuckles and Eggman, but Shadow is heavily part of everything to do with Sonic Adventure 2. Amy, on the other hand, is in the game, but she's not playable in the main story at all, and she doesn't do anything in the main story until the very last moment of the last story. So her presence is very minimal and small, and what does the rest of her appearances do in that story? Use her as a joke character. So she doesn't have much going for her in that front either. Rouge is a new character as well, but she's not going to be known by most people unless they play the game. She's not really part of the marketing that much, and the story doesn't focus too hard on Rouge. So the general public would probably only take Shadow away from Sonic Adventure 2, even if they only know his appearance and his name and nothing else. That's what they'll remember. The marketing weight of these characters is what's really important when you consider their use in the series going forward, well, at all times, really. Sonic is the main character, but he also shows speed, he has the attitude, and you associate him with fast gameplay. Tails is the sidekick character, but he can also fly and he can build useful equipment that help push that action-based gameplay forward. Knuckles has a lot of strength, he can break things, he can climb, he can dig, which adds to that gameplay experience as well. Robotnik is the enemy, but he also represents a nature versus technology theme that at least the earlier games had a more heavy emphasis on. Then you've got Metal Sonic, who also doesn't have a crazy amount of weight in the series compared to what you may expect these days, but even then, he was still the perfect antithesis of the idea robotics versus organics with Sonic and Metal Sonic, so he definitely had a role back then. And then you have Shadow, who, being the most recent out of the lot I've just named, showed the abilities of magic basically with his chaos powers, and the moral ambiguity of you're not sure, is he a good guy, is he a bad guy? All of the characters there add something to the series that supports the gameplay and the themes that the marketing team try to push, and they all play a role in forming that idea. Amy though, what does she add? Empathy? Well, yes, maybe, but the problem with that is that doesn't really support the rest of the things the marketing's trying to push. No one's trying to sell you on Sonic by saying, oh, it has empathy in its theming. That's not part of it. Notice how with the characters I listed prior, I didn't necessarily say all of their personality traits. Knuckles is gullible, I didn't mention that. He's a loner, I didn't mention that. Shadow has a lot of past and backstory, I didn't mention that. That isn't really what the marketing uses. They use specific, singular, prominent traits that support the gameplay and the idea that they want to push. So Amy having empathy, that doesn't play a role. What else does she have? She has her hammer, but we already have Knuckles, which is a way better and simpler way of conveying a lot of strength and power. Amy doesn't have anything. The only thing she has is that, unlike the rest of the characters, she's a girl. And that is a very lowball, basic point to put in the marketing. Of course, many things do use that as a marketing point, but for Sonic, that's not super important. That doesn't really change anything. Not to say that hasn't been done before. In fact, look at Sonic Origins. They put Amy in a prominent position in the cutscenes and marketing for Sonic Origins, swinging her hammer and being part of the team. But as I've been saying in this video, that isn't how the classic games actually went, and it causes a very strange distinction between marketing and gameplay of Origins, because you get the game and you wonder, where's this pink hedgehog, and she's not playable at all in any of the games because she never was and they didn't bother to add her in. So with this understanding that Amy has not really had much of a presence outside of the fan base, of course if you play the games and you watch all of the media, you're going to know who this character is. But when you think of the wider general audience, most people are probably not going to know much about the character. If anything, they'll just make general assumptions of, oh, she's a hedgehog, but she's pink, so she's just the girl equivalent of Sonic, which isn't too far wrong in how she's used a lot of the time, which is probably why that's how it's left. But with this understanding, when you look at Sonic Movie 3, and people saying they should put Amy in, I really think that would be a big mistake. The movie already is now going to have to balance Sonic, Tails and Knuckles, with the last two needing some more character development since they had to share it already in the second film. On top of that, they're going to have Shadow, who has the most backstory of any Sonic character in the series, and coming along with him, presumably, would be at the very least Gerald Robotnik, which we saw in some concept art, and Maria Robotnik. And from a marketing point of view, whilst people won't know who Gerald and Maria are initially, Gerald's surname is Robotnik. People aren't stupid, they can put 1 and 2 together. That's probably going to interest them since Robotnik's one of the most popular characters from the films. For a similar reason, Maria Robotnik has that same benefit. She also has the benefit though of having a very deep connection with Shadow, who's most definitely going to be a focus in that film. Amy, as I've said, does not have any of that. She would also have to be introduced fresh as a character right there in that third film, whereas in Adventure 2 she was already established so she could just tag along, which is to say that they have to put more effort to include her this time around. And even if they did do that, what is she going to do? Everyone's going to say, oh, but what about that scene where she talks to Shadow? That can be any character with a shred of empathy who can do it. We've already seen Sonic X give it to Chris Thorndike, of all people, and in the films, Maddie could do it, Tom could do it. A lot of characters who already exist could probably be the ones to do it. And remember, this film doesn't need to follow SA2 beat for beat, so that scene may not occur, and if it does, maybe not in the same way. So that role might not need to be filled anyway. And outside of that, there's nothing for Amy to do. She's just going to bloat the roster and give all those characters less time. Is it really worth Amy showing up to have an underdeveloped Knuckles, underdeveloped Tails, underdeveloped Shadow, and a rushed final arc of the movie. No, it's not. Amy does not add enough to justify that. You may really like that character and think she's super important, and that's fine. And you can probably list a bunch of cool character traits you think that make her interesting, and that's great. But if it doesn't contribute to the marketing, if it isn't going to help draw in the public audience, and if it isn't going to reasonably add to the contents of the media, whether that be a film or a game or a TV show, whatever it is, then she's not going to be included. And whilst I will agree with you that there's definitely an attempt these days to try and make her more relevant, it's also a little bit at the expense of the past, because in the past she just simply was not that relevant until somewhere in the mid-adventure era, where she really grew into the main role with Sonic X and Sonic Heroes and all of those games. But pretending she was always important isn't going to do that character any favours, as you can see with how Sonic Origins turned out with its misleading cutscenes. Still, that was really the main goal of my video here. I just wanted to explain my point of view as to why I do not think she's going to be in the third film at all. At best, she might get a hand-waved reference, but she's just not important enough to sacrifice screen time on. What do you think about this though? I'm sure a lot of you heavily disagree with me, and you'll let me know in the comments down below. Just remember that I'm trying to look at this from a more objective stance rather than how I feel about any specific character. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching it all the way to the end. I hope you have a good day, and to see you next time. This is the Mighty Emperor, signing off.